Hey, what if a home invader breaks in and takes you hostage? What if your partner drives off a bridge? What if there's a mass shooting at this theater? All kinds of stuff. And for a while, I could tell myself I was just being prepared. Mass shootings.
So just think of this psyche, especially someone who's now their job is to interact with people all day and of all different kinds of walks of life. And yeah, I also understand why people in this kind of scenario will experience very high levels of PTSD or other kinds of mental illness as a result of having to like view the world through this lens and force yourself to view the world through this lens, like reinforce it. I started watching this video. It was really interesting. I wanted to show it to all y'all because it actually is a first-hand account that talks a little bit about the psychology of cops and why they think the way they do and why we're getting kind of the results that we do. Also, if you haven't before, That Dang Dad is a really good, very far left channel of an ex-cop who obviously renounces his past and is now working full-time as a prison abolitionist and a police abolitionist or police reformer, whatever you want to call them, and has a lot of interesting takes on these subjects because he did them firsthand. So I need to change the title. Oh, and there is a content warning for this one. He does obviously go talk about some things that he saw that disturbed him and talks about mental health and how it affected him. But also talks about some techniques that he's found that work incredibly well for him in mental health.
Hey there, welcome to That Dang Dad. My name is Phil. And tonight, I want to return to a topic I haven't done a video on in a while, law enforcement. If you're new to the channel, you should know that I used to be a police officer in a pretty rowdy part of California. In the years since then, though, I've become a police and prison abolitionist, meaning I believe that the entire concept of police forces and prisons is not reformable and it must be replaced with something that's more compassionate, more just, more committed to dignity and meeting human needs. I'll put a link in the description below if you want to see me do a deeper dive on that topic. Tonight, though, I want to set aside the academic texts and the philosophy and all that nerd shit, and I want to get personal about how my time in law enforcement really fucked my brain
But I like nerd shit too. Okay, fine, we can have a POV.
up. Tonight we're going to be talking about state violence and some of the nasty stuff that cops see in the line of duty, so if you're not in the mood for blood and guts and man's inhumanity to man, you might want to skip this one tonight. Anyway, there's nothing cops love more than captivating an audience with a war story, so I'll start with one of mine. So there I was, Saturday night, M4 rifle in hand, monitoring the perimeter of a housing complex in the middle of a neighborhood. Our gang unit had been tracking an armed and dangerous gangster wanted for murder. They'd seen him enter the middle property of the triplex where his family was hiding him. Properties, we prepared to make a dynamic entry, as they say. You know, this is the police, come out with your hands up, no answer, in go the flashbangs, and go the tear gas. After a moment, the gang unit radioed that the gangster had climbed up into the attic of the triplex, which was accessible to the two end units. I was tasked with standing in the doorway of the south unit in case he tried to sneak out that way. I was reminded that he was armed, dangerous, and had already killed. So there I stood as the gang unit began to throw more and more tear gas up into the attic, waiting to see if this guy was going to drop down right in front of me. And I did what I'd been trained to do. I visualized shooting him in the chest until he stopped moving. Over and over and over and over again. I pictured him crashing through the ceiling. I pictured him sneaking around a corner. I pictured him running at me. I pictured him shooting at me. I pictured him wounding me. And every time I pictured firing until the threat had been eliminated. I have no idea how many times I annihilated this guy in my mind palace. 40, 50 times. And it's not because I hated this guy or really wanted to score my first kill on the job. It was because I wasn't quite sure I could actually do it. I was taking a page out of Dave Grossman's training and I was psyching myself up and convincing myself that yes, I could kill someone if I had to. After all, he was armed, he was dangerous, and he'd already killed before. So what options did I have? Ultimately, blinded and choking on tear gas, he fell through the roof of the middle unit directly in front of our canine unit. Did you know dogs are not incapacitated by tear gas? The gangster and I both learned this right about the same time, and it was a bad night for him. After all that, I put my gear back in my cop car, took a quick drink of water, and resumed my shift. Off to go break up loud parties, referee marital disputes, and chase away teens on a would-be.
Now, this is why this is so fascinating, especially to hear it firsthand from someone. And I don't want to spoil what he's about to describe next, but I don't know if you recall, a while ago, I debated Lycan on, and I've debated Destiny on this too, on violence that is either shown to bear out in statistics by either the military personnel or by police officers. And they both had this kind of view that they feel that people who are already kind of predisposed to certain kinds of violence like that will gravitate towards those sectors. So someone who is a little has more violent tendencies may gravitate towards wanting to join the military or the police, rather than, and this was the view that I was espousing and still do, the training itself and a lot of the effects of what that training has on people can result in them being put into this almost psyche of constant antagonism, right? Constantly trying to prepare to battle, constantly trying to be the warrior, constantly trying to defend yourself at all costs. People are out to get you, and you have to be prepared for that. And when the moment comes, you have to strike first in order to survive. That kind of idea, and then imprinting it on people, and then kind of trying to look at the data as to why so many people may have things like PTSD, and obviously a lot of that will come from them experiencing combat, from them seeing grisly shit, from them being in that world for a consistent period of time. But outside of the data, when you actually hear it firsthand, this part actually is what really kind of, I don't know, illuminates the story.
Beer run, all that violent energy I'd been working with, all that visualization of hurting and killing people, gone. On to the next call. I tell you this story because it's emblematic of much of my law enforcement career. When I first started out, I was criticized for being meek, timid, too slow to show dominance out in the field. I was taught that showing that kind of weakness on calls would make me a target for attack. I was shown hundreds of videos of cops being killed on routine calls for service by assailants who didn't really look like killers. At the same time, on my days off, I was training in Krav Maga alongside many other cops and military veterans. Krav is extremely aggressive, and it very often touches on mindset. We trained on how to fight a carjacker inside your own car. We trained on last-ditch techniques to disarm somebody who was trying to shoot you execution style. One night, the instructor made us fight, cradling a baby doll in our arms to simulate our own child. The point was that you never knew what kind of awful situation might be coming your way. So over time, I internalized this message. At any given time, someone out there is going to hurt you if you're not ready to hurt them first. If you let your guard down for even a second, they'll kill you. In the police business, this is how we talk about officer safety. The most respected veteran officers that I worked with were the ones that were pulling young guys back from running around blind corners. They were the ones saying, "Hey, did you search that dumpster before we turn our back on it?" You got the sense that they had seen things and that they knew how to keep themselves safe. And you got the sense that the big thing you can do to protect yourself on the job is to mentally prepare for that day. And since you never knew what form the attack would take, it's best to just run scenarios in your head constantly, building those mental pathways so that when it finally does happen, you'll know exactly what to do. So that's what I trained my brain to do on duty. I drove around and I imagined. What if a guy with a gun popped out of the trunk of that car over there and started shooting at me? What if I saw a man with a knife running down that alley? What would I do if a
This sounds like such a horrifying way to live. Like, there are times when I will have social anxiety for whatever reason, and it could be for a variety of different things. It doesn't matter, like, it could be the scenario, could be the people I'm around, could be something that just happened, could be like you heard a very loud noise or something like that. But I couldn't imagine having that feeling 24/7 and trying to perceive everything as a potential threat all the time. Like everything,
plane crashed into City Hall. Over time, my brain began to do this off-duty as well. I wouldn't sit in restaurants with my back to the front door so that I could monitor everybody coming in. I walked through mall parking lots with my head on a swivel. I stared down people who looked out of place just so they'd known that I'd seen them. I was constantly in a state of vigilance. Not concern, just vigilance. My Krav instructor used the color code system to talk about emotional states, white, yellow, orange, red, black. And he used to say that you should never leave the house without being at least code yellow, that you should never be totally relaxed in public. And
so Red was ready to fight. Like, is that the ultimate way to be prepared as you leave your house?
I never was. And to this day, I never am. It's been a long time since my cop days now, but this hypervigilance has never left me. And what at one time felt like a survival tool I was proud of, now just makes me exhausted and probably exhausting to be around. I hate leaving my house. I don't like going out and doing things with lots of people. If it's too loud and crowded somewhere, I don't feel like I'm in control. I don't feel safe. Sometimes I dissociate a little bit just as a treat. But even worse than the hypervigilance, the thing I can't turn off is my imagination. Not only did law enforcement train me to imagine 1,000 different horrible events, law enforcement involved my participation in 1,000 different horrible events. I've seen bodies riddled with bullets. I've seen stabbing victims crawling through their own blood. I've seen car accidents render the driver unrecognizable. And I've seen children horrifically abused and even killed. So even now, long after my cop days, my brain will conjure up unbidden hey, what if this happened? Hey, what if a home invader breaks in and takes you hostage? What if your partner drives off a bridge? What if there's a mass shooting at this theater? All kinds of stuff. And for a while, I could tell myself I was just being prepared. Mass shootings.
So just think of this psyche, especially someone who's now their job is to interact with people all day and of all different kinds of walks of life. Now, I'm not saying universally all police training is the same. That's ridiculous. And obviously it's going to differ from location to location. But the idea of hypervigilance is certainly a factor that you see in a lot of police training. And the idea also of protecting yourself above all else, that's imperative. I mean, that's something that every single time we play a video by either someone who was an ex-law enforcement officer trainer or someone who was an ex-law enforcer, they say the same thing. This seems to be a consistent theme. And yeah, I also understand why people in this kind of scenario will experience very high levels of PTSD or other kinds of mental illness as a result of having to view the world through this lens and force yourself to view the world through this lens, reinforce it.
Happen all the time in the United States. Why shouldn't I mentally prepare?
Combat veteran here, and you never get rid of it. I hate crowds because it's impossible to enjoy myself. That's so fucking sad.
I wrote this line after the Buffalo shooting and before the Uvalde shooting. It wasn't until my daughter was born that I started to realize that maybe actually what I was doing wasn't normal. All new parents experience the fears and the what ifs, but I spent the first year and a half of my daughter's life in an almost daily battle with my own mind. It was a constant onslaught of the most horrible what if scenarios you can possibly imagine. So bad, I won't even describe them to you.
Topper says, I saw some shit as a firefighter and a first responder. We were taught to try and let it go, not marinate it. And yeah, one version seems like a pathway to at least some form of healing. And the other one seems like an intentional reinforcement of this.
Every night, I had to fight my brain to go to sleep. Breathing exercises, meditations, rain sounds, sleep stories, melatonin, CBD. Anything that would just shut the projector off. It's a minor miracle I didn't end up abusing alcohol very much during that time, because some nights a nice big glass of scotch was a really easy way to tell my brain to just shut the fuck up. I was looking into therapy at one point, and then COVID hit, and between that and budget stuff, I basically just gave up on that idea for the time being. After some research, I ended up buying a self-guided CBT workbook. Not that kind, the other kind. And doing exercises in that for a while. And believe it or not, that actually kind of helped. I don't know if it was just feeling like I had some kind of outlet to work on this stuff, or whether I just got less anxious over time as my daughter stayed healthy and happy. But I'm in a much better place than I was 2 years ago. I'll even give you one of my tricks in case you need it. When I catch my thoughts start to race down a bad path and I realize that I'm rehearsing for tragedy, I'll say to myself out loud, you don't need to rehearse right now. If this ever happens, you'll know what to do. And if the thought is really atrocious, sometimes I will say to myself out loud, this is a stupid fucking thing to obsess over. We're going to think about a different topic right now. Something about saying it out loud just makes for a nice thought pattern reboot. I don't know why it works for me, but it does. So why am I telling you all this? Is it to generate sympathy for cops? Absolutely not. ACAB forever. Is it to dissuade young people from going into law enforcement? No, but I'll take it. I think the reason that I wanted to talk about this tonight was as a way of explaining why so many cops behave the way that they do, and why they seem to feel a sense of entitlement about being exonerated after, say, shooting an unarmed person or refusing to run into a school to save children. I am not the only person to have their brain broken by law enforcement, and many of the people to whom that happened are still cops. That hypervigilance, those obsessive thoughts about danger around every corner, that's part of law enforcement culture. It's part of the training. It's part of the mentoring. It's woven into the DNA of how cops operate every day. That's why there's this almost unbridgeable gulf between a normal person who says something like, "Why did you punch that guy 37 times just for having his hands in his pockets?" and the cop who replies, "Because I didn't know what was in there. It could have been a knife or a gun or a jar of battery acid that he was going to throw in my face. I didn't want to take the chance." I guarantee you that cop was at a seminar one time where some old head was telling a war story about his partner Bob Sacamano, who actually did get battery acid thrown in his face. There are approximately 900,000 police officers in the United States,
Wow.
and I'm willing to bet that the vast majority of them were trained like I was and have the same mental pathways that I have. That's a lot of unarmed, unaccountable people running around fantasizing about being executed in the streets every day. And yeah, this may inspire some sympathy in you for those cops. I don't think it's a coincidence that cops endure this kind of abusive working mode and then turn to alcohol abuse and even more notoriously, child abuse and intimate partner abuse. Yes, many people who are already abusive enter law enforcement because the profession protects abusers, but I do think that the job can, over time, make people much more abusive than they were when they started, both through the training and through the peer pressure. Counseling and therapy are totally stigmatized in law enforcement. If your department finds out that you're receiving mental health treatment, you risk missing out on special assignments and promotions for being unstable.
Wow.
So everyone fighting these demons is fighting alone. But I'm not arguing for sympathy, and I'm not asking you to empathize with anyone. Instead, all of this is yet another reason why I am a police abolitionist and why I believe that the profession, as it exists today, cannot be reformed into something better and must instead be replaced. The hundreds of thousands of cops with these hyper-vigilant, alarmist thought patterns are not going to be receptive to being disarmed and trained not to kill. Hell, when I was a cop, even in my later nice cop years, I wouldn't have been receptive to being part of an unarmed community service role. I would have balked at any training that said that police should err on the side of not killing someone during a tense, uncertain, rapidly evolving situation. I would have told you that it was dangerous to dissuade cops from killing because it means that they will hesitate when that day comes.
I wonder if that's a program you could actually advocate for I wonder if, like, you know, if you're looking for easy victories, things where people wouldn't complain too much, and when it comes to, like, defunding the police, obviously that is a non-starter for both political parties in the U.S., but if it came down to something like, well, what about taking some of the money that's already in the police budget, because they're monstrous, and instead of buying grenade launchers, you put it into mandatory counseling for police officers. That way no one has to appear to be a beta cuck. They don't have to be the beta cuck on the force. Everyone has to go through a little bit of it. And then the whatever percentage of people who actually could really use some of that at least become maybe a little less trigger happy or less violent on the streets. I don't know. The problem is it would be really difficult to demonstrate any kind of statistical data based on that, because it's like, can we point towards this one thing, or would there have to be multiple things? I don't know. I think mandatory counseling sessions could potentially have a benefit. The cop angle would be a good way to expand public mental health care. Yeah, you could start there and then expand outward, and then everyone has access if they would need it.
Any training or policy
Instead of making cops less trigger happy, they want to make teachers more trigger happy. It's also true.
put civilian lives ahead of police officer lives would have been killed off by a massive mobilization of angry officers. Among the 900,000 cops out there, are there caring, compassionate officers who just want their community to be safe? Sure. Would some of them make amazing community care responders and conflict mediators and mental health crisis counselors? Absolutely. But these officers are not driving department policy, they're certainly not driving federal policy, and they are not leading the culture of modern American law enforcement. They exist, but they are not representative of the whole of policing. And when you call 911, there's a low likelihood that you're going to get officer friendly instead of Sergeant Dick rifle. From the frequent police murders of unarmed civilians to the now frequent refusal of police to defend school children, it's painfully obvious that the American officer safety mindset is a clear and present threat to everyone in this country. Anytime you're within 20 feet of a cop, you are in danger, both from their overactive imagination and from their total systemic insulation from consequences. You should never feel safe when the cops arrive, unless you're rich and white. Anyway, a weirdly personal one tonight. What do you think? I'm sure those of you with CPTSD can probably relate to the racing thoughts and hypervigilance. What techniques work for you? Also, how do you like these little low-key, kind of sloppy vlogs as opposed to my more researched, more complex topics? Let us know in the comments.
I think A, that was like, thank you for sharing. B, I think it's really important because like I wouldn't, POVs help me a lot, especially, I know we're all empaths and we all have empath powers and we use our empath powers whenever we want to truly understand something that we didn't have as a lived experience. But when the empath powers fail, it's really nice to have someone like just firsthand be like, hey, by the way, this is my life. This is what happened. This is how I experienced it. And at the end of the day, this is how it affected me. Then I'm like, okay, wow, this makes like, it's illuminating. It makes it, and the whole thing makes a lot of sense, to be completely frank.
Always, please slap the old like button. God, it feels tonally inconsistent to be like, I spent many years fantasizing about me and my loved ones being tortured and killed. Don't forget to like. Anyway, please
share. Well, I'll do it. Just go, I put the links in the chat. Go leave a heartfelt comment, give them some thumbs up and some subs and, Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Just, we are prepared to embark on a mighty jihad in your name. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your humble jesters, attempting in vain to get you to laugh. To our valiant knights of the Round Table, Benji Arnie, Tech Tink, Scary Earth Human, Tony, DM Rivera, Resident Scarecrow, Sir Nickus, Mayred, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Brandon, Words Greenwood. It doesn't matter what I believe, it only matters what I can prove. Egbert Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Daniel Sutton, Coulter Smith, Jenna Tao, Quiet 185, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, The Tim Caucus, Multimondi, Trevbot, EXE, Brian Ephraim, Lemmy 101, Anthropophojak, Saren 42, Catherine, Ramon Acosta, Incosin, Agent NDN, Violent Orchard, Political Puppy, La Media Panza, Zach Christensen, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. We raise our mugs and salute our brave heroes off to another glorious conquest.